Step back in time with us as we journey through the silent corridors of history. Tonight, we uncover the fascinating, years-long transformation of a boy into a knight in medieval Europe, a tale of grit, discipline, and unwavering ambition. Discover what it truly took to earn the sword, the armor, and the honor of knighthood. If you're passionate about history, legends, and forgotten worlds, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Join our growing community of time travelers. The process of becoming a knight was not a sudden transformation, but rather a gradual evolution that began in childhood and continued through adolescence into early adulthood. It was a system that had developed over centuries, shaped by the needs of feudal society, the influence of the Christian Church, and the practical requirements of medieval warfare. This system would remain largely unchanged for hundreds of years, creating generations of knights who followed similar paths to their eventual elevation to this prestigious rank. In the early medieval period, around the 9th and 10th centuries, knighthood was primarily a military necessity. Local lords needed skilled cavalry to defend their lands and project power across the countryside. The heavy cavalry charge, with armored men on horseback wielding lances, had become the dominant military tactic of the age. This tactical supremacy of mounted warriors naturally led to their elevated social status, as those who could afford the expensive equipment and training required for knighthood became the military elite of their communities. The path to knighthood typically began when a boy reached the age of 7 or 8. At this tender age, he would be sent away from his family home to serve as a page in the household of a lord or knight. This separation from family was often permanent, as the boy would spend the remainder of his childhood and adolescence in service to his new master. The practice of sending children away to serve as pages was deeply embedded in medieval culture and was considered essential for proper social development. As a page, the young boy would learn the fundamental skills that would serve him throughout his life. He would be taught to read and write, though literacy was not universal even among the nobility. More importantly, he would learn the basic principles of courtesy, etiquette, and proper behavior in noble society. The page would serve at table during meals, learning to move quietly and efficiently while observing the conversations and interactions of the adults around him. He would help his master dress, maintain his equipment, and perform various household duties that taught him the importance of order and discipline. The daily routine of a page was structured and repetitive. He would rise early, often before dawn, to assist with the morning preparations. He would help lay out clothing, polish metal items, and ensure that everything was properly arranged for the day ahead. During meals, he would stand silently behind his master's chair, ready to refill cups, bring additional food, or respond to any request. Between formal duties, he would receive instruction in reading, writing, and basic mathematics, though these academic pursuits were considered secondary to the practical skills of noble life. Physical training began early in a page's development. He would start with simple exercises designed to build strength and coordination. Running, jumping, and climbing were common activities, as was basic weapons training with wooden swords and shields. The page would practice the fundamental stances and movements that would later be refined during his time as a squire. These early training sessions were often conducted in groups, with several pages learning together under the supervision of an experienced knight or master-at-arms. The social hierarchy within the noble household was clearly defined, and the page quickly learned his place within this structure. He was expected to show proper respect to all those above him in rank, while also understanding that his current position was temporary and that advancement was possible through dedication and good service. This understanding of hierarchy and social order would remain crucial throughout his eventual career as a knight. Religious instruction formed another important component of a page's education. The medieval world was deeply Christian, and the church played a central role in legitimizing and sanctifying the institution of knighthood. Young pages attended daily prayers, learned basic Christian doctrine, and began to understand the moral and spiritual obligations that would eventually be formalized in their knightly vows. This religious education emphasized virtues such as humility, charity, and protection of the weak, ideals that would later be incorporated into the code of chivalry. The transition from page to squire typically occurred around the age of 14 or 15. This advancement marked a significant milestone in the young man's development and brought with it increased responsibilities and more intensive training. The ceremony marking this transition was usually simple, often involving little more than a formal acknowledgement of the page's new status and perhaps a blessing from a priest or chaplain. As a squire, the young man would be assigned to serve a specific knight, often but not always the same lord who had been his master during his time as a page. The relationship between knight and squire was more personal and intensive than that between master and page. The squire would become his knight's personal attendant, responsible for maintaining his armor and weapons, caring for his horses, and accompanying him in battle and on various journeys. The daily routine of a squire was demanding and varied. Each morning, he would rise early to tend to his knight's equipment. Medieval armor and weapons required constant maintenance to remain in proper working condition. The squire would clean and oil metal surfaces to prevent rust, check leather straps and fastenings for wear, and ensure that every piece of equipment was properly organized and ready for use. This attention to detail was crucial, as a knight's life might depend on the reliability of his equipment. Horse care formed another essential aspect of a squire's duties. Medieval warfare depended heavily on cavalry, and a knight's horses were among his most valuable possessions. The squire would feed, groom, and exercise these animals daily, learning to recognize signs of illness or injury and understanding the specific care requirements of different types of horses. A destrier, the heavy war horse used in battle, required different care than a palfrey used for everyday riding or a pack horse used to carry supplies. The squire's military training intensified significantly during this period. He would spend hours each day practicing with various weapons, including swords, lances, maces, and crossbows. This practice was methodical and repetitive, designed to build muscle memory and reflexes that would serve him well in combat. The squire would practice against wooden targets, called quintaines, which were designed to simulate the experience of striking an opponent while maintaining balance on horseback. Mounted combat training was particularly important and challenging. The squire would practice riding at full gallop while controlling his horse with his legs and maintaining his balance as he wielded various weapons. He would learn to couch a lance properly, timing the moment of impact to maximize the force of the blow while maintaining his seat in the saddle. He would practice sword work from horseback, learning to strike effectively while managing the movement of his mount and protecting himself from counterattacks. The squire would also receive training in siege warfare, learning to operate various types of siege engines and understanding the tactics involved in attacking or defending fortified positions. This training included the use of catapults, ballistae, and later, early gunpowder weapons. The squire would learn to construct temporary fortifications, dig trenches, and coordinate with other military units during complex operations. Beyond military skills, the squire continued his education in the social graces expected of a knight. He would learn to dance, sing, and play musical instruments, as these accomplishments were considered essential for a well-rounded nobleman. He would study poetry and literature, particularly the growing body of romantic and chivalric literature that celebrated knightly virtues and adventures. This literary education helped shape his understanding of the ideals and expectations associated with knighthood. The concept of courtly love, which emerged during the 12th century, became an important element of knightly culture and education. Squires would learn the elaborate rituals and conventions associated with this idealized form of romantic devotion, understanding how to compose love poetry, conduct themselves in the presence of noble ladies, and participate in the complex social dynamics of medieval court life. This aspect of knightly training emphasized refinement, self-control, and the elevation of romantic love to a spiritual ideal. Hunting was another crucial component of a squire's training. Medieval nobles considered hunting to be both a practical skill and a form of entertainment that closely resembled warfare. The squire would learn to track various types of game, understand the behavior of different animals, and master the use of hunting weapons such as bows, crossbows, and hunting spears. Large hunting expeditions involving multiple nobles and their retinues provided opportunities for the squire to observe and participate in the complex social interactions of noble society. The squire's education also included practical knowledge of heraldry, the system of symbols and colors used to identify different noble families and their allegiances. He would learn to recognize the coats of arms of various lords and understand the significance of different heraldic devices. This knowledge was essential for identifying friend and foe on the battlefield and understanding the complex web of feudal relationships that governed medieval society. Throughout his time as a squire, the young man would accompany his knight on various journeys and expeditions. These travels provided practical experience and exposure to different regions, cultures, and ways of life. The squire would learn to navigate by the stars, understand road conditions and weather patterns, and manage the logistics of travel with horses, equipment, and supplies. These journeys also provided opportunities to meet other knights and nobles, expanding the squire's social network and understanding of the broader world. The squire's relationship with his knight was complex and multifaceted. While the knight served as teacher and mentor, the relationship was also one of master and servant, with the squire expected to obey orders without question and to place his knight's needs above his own. This dynamic taught important lessons about loyalty, duty, and self-sacrifice that would later be central to the squire's own role as a knight. The length of time spent as a squire varied depending on various factors, including the squire's skill development, the availability of opportunities for advancement, and the specific customs of different regions. Some squires might be elevated to knighthood as early as age 18, while others might serve for several more years before receiving this honor. The decision to elevate a squire to knighthood was typically made by his knightmaster, though it might also involve the approval of a higher lord or even the king. The ceremony of knighthood, known as dubbing, was a solemn and significant occasion that marked the culmination of years of training and service. The specific rituals and traditions associated with this ceremony evolved over time and varied between different regions and periods, but certain elements remained consistent throughout the medieval era. Preparation for the dubbing ceremony often began several days in advance. The squire would undergo a period of spiritual preparation, including fasting, prayer, and meditation on the responsibilities he was about to assume. This spiritual preparation emphasized the religious aspects of knighthood and the sacred nature of the vows he would take. The squire would often spend a night in vigil, praying alone in a chapel or church, contemplating the significance of his transformation from squire to knight. The actual ceremony typically took place in a religious setting, such as a church or chapel, though it might also occur in a great hall or outdoor location during times of war or special circumstances. The presence of clergy was considered essential, as they would bless the new knight and his equipment, sanctifying his elevation to this honored rank. The ceremony would usually be attended by other knights, nobles, and members of the local community, emphasizing the public nature of the commitment being made. The central moment of the ceremony was the actual dubbing, when the squire would kneel before his sponsor, usually his knightmaster or another senior knight. The sponsor would place his hands on the squire's shoulders or head and speak the words that formally elevated him to knighthood. The exact words varied, but they typically included an acknowledgement of the squire's worthiness and a charge to uphold the values and responsibilities of knighthood. In some ceremonies, the sponsor would strike the new knight lightly on the shoulder or neck with the flat of his sword, a symbolic gesture known as the accolade. The new knight would then take his vows, swearing to uphold various principles and obligations. These vows typically included promises to defend the church and the faith, to protect the weak and defenseless, to show mercy to fallen enemies, to be truthful and honest in all dealings, and to maintain loyalty to his lord and fellow knights. The specific wording of these vows evolved over time, but their essential meaning remained constant throughout the medieval period. The blessing of the knight's equipment formed another important part of the ceremony. His sword, shield, armor, and other weapons would be blessed by a priest or bishop, sanctifying these tools of war and emphasizing their sacred purpose. The sword, in particular, held special significance as it was seen as a symbol of justice and the knight's authority to enforce God's will on earth. The blessing of the sword often included prayers that it would be used only for righteous purposes and never for personal gain or evil intent. The new knight would be formally invested with the symbols of his rank, including his sword, spurs, and sometimes a special belt or other insignia. These items were not merely decorative, but served as constant reminders of the knight's obligations and status. The golden spurs, in particular, became a universal symbol of knighthood, representing the knight's right to ride a warhorse and his obligation to charge forward in battle when duty called. Following the formal ceremony, there would often be a celebration feast, where the new knight would be welcomed into the brotherhood of knights by his peers. This celebration served both to honor the achievement and to reinforce the bonds of fellowship and mutual obligation that connected all knights. The feast might include entertainment such as music, dancing, and storytelling, with particular emphasis on tales of knightly valor and adventure. The financial aspects of knighthood were significant and could not be ignored. Becoming a knight required substantial resources, as the new knight would need to acquire and maintain expensive equipment, horses, and weapons. A complete suit of armor, properly fitted and crafted, could cost as much as a small farm. The knight's war horses were similarly expensive, as they required specialized breeding, training, and care. These costs meant that knighthood was generally limited to those with sufficient economic resources, usually through land ownership or the patronage of wealthy lords. The knight's equipment evolved significantly over the medieval period, reflecting advances in metallurgy, engineering, and military tactics. Early medieval knights might wear simple mail shirts and carry basic weapons, while later knights would don elaborate plate armor and wield sophisticated weapons designed for specific combat situations. The development of new armor styles and weapon technologies required knights to continuously update their equipment and training, ensuring that they remained effective in an evolving military environment. The code of chivalry, while not formally codified until later periods, began to emerge during the High Medieval era as a set of ideals and expectations that governed knightly behavior. This code emphasized concepts such as honor, courage, courtesy, and protection of the innocent. It also included more practical considerations, such as the proper treatment of prisoners, the conduct of warfare, and the maintenance of feudal obligations. The chivalric ideal represented an attempt to civilize and channel the inherent violence of medieval warfare toward more noble and socially beneficial purposes. The influence of literature and poetry on knightly culture cannot be overstated. The emergence of Arthurian romance, chansons de geste, and other forms of chivalric literature provided knights with models of ideal behavior and heroic achievement. These stories celebrated knightly virtues while also entertaining audiences with tales of adventure, romance, and supernatural wonder. Young knights would study these works not only for entertainment, but also as guides for proper conduct and sources of inspiration for their own careers. The role of tournaments in knightly culture developed during the 12th century and became increasingly important as both training exercises and social events. These elaborate competitions allowed knights to display their martial skills in a controlled environment, while also providing opportunities for social interaction and political networking. Tournaments evolved from simple mock battles to complex events with multiple competitions, elaborate pageantry, and significant prizes for winners. The economic impact of knighthood extended beyond the individual knight to affect entire communities and regions. Knights required the services of armorers, weaponsmiths, horse trainers, and various other specialists. The maintenance of knightly households provided employment for numerous servants, craftsmen, and professionals. The castle-building programs initiated by knights and their lords created work for masons, carpenters, and laborers, while also reshaping the physical landscape of medieval Europe. The relationship between knights and the church was complex and sometimes contradictory. While the church blessed knights and their weapons, sanctifying their role as defenders of Christendom, it also struggled with the inherent violence of knightly culture. The church's attempts to channel knightly aggression toward approved targets, such as infidels during the Crusades or heretics during various religious conflicts, reflected this ongoing tension between spiritual ideals and military realities. The Crusades, beginning in the late 11th century, provided a new outlet for knightly energy and ambition, while also introducing European knights to new cultures, technologies, and ways of thinking. Knights who participated in these expeditions to the Holy Land gained experience in different forms of warfare, encountered advanced military technologies, and established connections with knights from other regions of Europe. The Crusades also led to the formation of military orders, such as the Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitaller, which combined monastic discipline with military service. The training and development of knights was not uniform across all regions of medieval Europe. Different areas developed their own customs, traditions, and specific requirements for knighthood. German knights, for example, placed particular emphasis on loyalty to the Holy Roman Emperor, while French knights developed elaborate courtly traditions that influenced chivalric culture throughout Europe. English knights, following the Norman conquest, blended Anglo-Saxon and Norman traditions to create their own distinctive knightly culture. The decline of knighthood as a dominant military force began in the late medieval period, with the development of new military technologies and tactics. The rise of professional infantry, the widespread adoption of gunpowder weapons, and changes in military organization gradually reduced the effectiveness of heavy cavalry on the battlefield. However, the social and cultural aspects of knighthood proved more durable, and the ideals and traditions associated with knighthood continued to influence European culture long after knights had ceased to dominate medieval battlefields. The process of becoming a knight was both intensely personal and deeply social. Each individual knight experienced his own unique journey, from page to squire to knight, shaped by his particular circumstances, mentors, and experiences. At the same time, this process was embedded within larger social structures and cultural traditions that connected each knight to his peers and to the broader feudal system. The knight's training prepared him not only for military service, but also for his role as a landowner, administrator, and leader within his community. The daily life of a knight, once he had achieved this status, was governed by a complex web of obligations and expectations. He owed military service to his lord, typically 40 days per year, though this obligation could be commuted to a monetary payment called scutage. He was expected to maintain his equipment and horses in constant readiness for war. He had responsibilities to his tenants and vassals, including the administration of justice and the protection of their rights. He was also expected to participate in the social and cultural life of his community, attending court ceremonies, religious festivals, and various social gatherings. The knight's relationship with his family was shaped by the feudal concepts of inheritance and bloodline. Knighthood was often, though not always, hereditary. with the eldest son expected to inherit his father's lands and titles. Younger sons might seek their fortunes through military service, marriage, or by joining the clergy. The knight's wife played an important role in managing the household and estates, particularly during his absences on military campaigns or other duties. The education of the knight's children would follow patterns similar to those he had experienced, with sons sent away to serve as pages and daughters prepared for marriage into other noble families. The architectural legacy of knighthood is visible throughout Europe, in the form of castles, fortified manor houses, and other defensive structures. These buildings served both practical and symbolic purposes, providing protection for the knight and his household, while also demonstrating his wealth, power, and status within the feudal hierarchy. The construction and maintenance of these structures required significant resources and skilled craftsmen, contributing to the development of architectural techniques and artistic traditions that influenced European culture for centuries. The influence of knighthood on language and literature was profound and lasting. Many words related to honor, courtesy, and noble behavior derive from the vocabulary of chivalry. The concept of the gentleman, which became central to European social ideals, evolved directly from medieval concepts of knightly behavior. The literary traditions established during the medieval period, including the Arthurian legends and various chivalric romances, continued to influence writers and artists throughout subsequent centuries. The legal aspects of knighthood were complex and varied between different regions and time periods. Knights enjoyed certain legal privileges, including the right to trial by their peers and exemption from certain forms of punishment. They also had legal obligations, including the requirement to provide military service and to maintain the peace within their domains. The development of feudal law was closely connected to the institution of knighthood, as the legal relationships between lords and vassals provided the framework within which knightly obligations were defined and enforced. The international character of knighthood facilitated cultural exchange and communication across medieval Europe. Knights from different regions often served together in military campaigns, participated in the same tournaments, and shared similar values and traditions. This shared culture helped create a sense of unity among the European nobility, despite political divisions and conflicts. The Latin language, which was used for religious services and scholarly communication, provided a common means of communication among knights from different countries. The spiritual dimension of knighthood was emphasized through various religious practices and observances. Knights were expected to attend Mass regularly, observe religious holidays, and support the church through financial contributions and military service. Many knights went on pilgrimages to holy sites, both as expressions of religious devotion and as opportunities for adventure and social interaction. The concept of the knight as a Christian warrior fighting for God and the faith provided a religious justification for the violence inherent in knightly culture. The transformation of medieval warfare during the later medieval period did not immediately end the institution of knighthood, but rather changed its character and focus. As heavy cavalry became less dominant on the battlefield, knights adapted by developing new military skills and taking on different roles within evolving military organizations. Some knights became military engineers, specializing in siege warfare and the construction of fortifications. Others became commanders of professional infantry units or specialists in the use of gunpowder weapons. The economic changes of the later medieval period also affected the institution of knighthood. The growth of towns and trade created new sources of wealth that were not necessarily connected to land ownership. Merchant families with sufficient resources could sometimes purchase knighthoods or marry into knightly families, gradually altering the social composition of the knightly class. The development of banking and credit systems also changed the way military campaigns were financed and equipped. The Renaissance period saw a renewed interest in classical learning and culture, which influenced the ideals and self-perception of the knightly class. Humanist scholars emphasize the importance of education, cultural refinement, and civic responsibility, concepts that were incorporated into evolving definitions of noble behavior. The Renaissance knight was expected to be not only a warrior, but also a scholar, artist, and courtier, skilled in multiple disciplines and capable of contributing to the cultural life of his community. The process of becoming a knight, as it developed over the medieval period, represented one of the most comprehensive and demanding educational systems of its time. The years of training, from page to squire to knight, provided not only military instruction, but also moral guidance, social education, and spiritual development. This system produced individuals who were prepared to assume positions of leadership and responsibility within their communities, contributing to the stability and development of medieval society. The legacy of knighthood extended far beyond the medieval period, influencing concepts of honor, duty, and service that continue to shape modern military and civilian institutions. The ideals of chivalry, while adapted to changing circumstances, provided a model for ethical behavior that influenced the development of codes of conduct for officers, gentlemen, and public servants. The emphasis on personal honor, protection of the weak, and service to a greater cause remained relevant long after the decline of feudalism. The rituals and ceremonies associated with knighthood created powerful symbols and traditions that continued to influence European culture throughout subsequent centuries. The dubbing ceremony, with its emphasis on solemn vows and sacred obligations, provided a model for various forms of initiation and commitment that were adopted by other institutions. The symbolism of the sword, the spurs, and other knightly insignia became part of the broader vocabulary of honor and achievement that continues to influence modern ceremonial practices. The long journey from page to squire to knight required patience, dedication, and an understanding that true achievement comes through gradual development rather than sudden transformation. The medieval system of knightly training recognized that the qualities necessary for leadership and service could not be quickly acquired, but must be developed through years of practice, observation, and experience. This understanding of the importance of gradual development and comprehensive preparation provided lessons that remain relevant for modern educational and professional development programs. The bonds of fellowship and mutual obligation that connected knights to one another created a sense of shared identity and purpose that transcended local and regional boundaries. This brotherhood of knights, while sometimes marked by competition and conflict, also provided a framework for cooperation and mutual support that contributed to the stability and development of medieval civilization. The concept of knightly honor, which emphasized loyalty, courage, and service to others, provided a counterbalance to the individualism and self-interest that might otherwise have dominated medieval society. The story of becoming a knight is ultimately a story of transformation and commitment, of young men who dedicated their lives to ideals of service and honor that were larger than themselves. This transformation required not only physical training and military skill, but also moral development and spiritual growth. The knight's oath, taken at the moment of dubbing, represented a promise to live according to these higher ideals, to use his strength and skill in service of justice and protection of the innocent. As we reach the end of this exploration of the path to knighthood, we can reflect on the enduring significance of the ideals and traditions that shaped this remarkable institution. The medieval knight, trained from childhood in the arts of war and peace, bound by sacred oaths to serve his lord and protect his people, represents one of history's most distinctive and influential social types. The system that produced these knights, with its emphasis on gradual development, comprehensive training, and solemn commitment, offers insights into the nature of leadership, service, and human potential that remain relevant across the centuries. The quiet transformation of a young page into a skilled squire and finally into a sworn knight reminds us that the most significant achievements in human life often come not through dramatic moments, but through patient dedication to long-term goals. The medieval path to knighthood, with its years of training and preparation, its emphasis on moral development alongside practical skills, and its culmination in sacred vows of service, provides a model of human development that speaks to timeless values and aspirations. In the stillness of historical reflection, we can appreciate the dedication and sacrifice of those who followed this demanding path, accepting years of service and training in pursuit of an ideal that placed duty above personal comfort and honor above material gain. Their story, preserved in the chronicles and legends of medieval Europe, continues to inspire and instruct us about the possibilities of human achievement and the importance of commitment to principles greater than ourselves. The journey from page to knight, with all its challenges and rewards, serves as a reminder that the most meaningful accomplishments in life often require patience, persistence, and a willingness to place service to others above personal ambition. In contemplating this ancient path to honor and responsibility, we find lessons that remain as relevant today as they were in the great halls and training grounds of medieval Europe, where young men learned that true strength comes not from the sword alone, but from the character and commitment of those who wield it.